Okay, who's ready for chapter 16, the weapon dropping? You guys ready? Okay, so remember Hildebrand is now joining Dirk Jan and going to be with his family. So after he's escaped. Hildebrand, that's how he introduced himself. Mr. Hildebrand? Asked Mother. No, just Hildebrand. It's not really my name. He explained, it's a pen name of a Dutch writer I like, but the less you know about me, the safer for you. Mother nodded. Hildebrand felt happy at once in the Watchman. Father and Mother welcomed him cordially, and he loved the children. He had quite a conversation with Trixie the first time they met. Hello, he said. You seem to be a sensible young lady. For Trixie had taken off her socks and was warming her bare feet against the lukewarm stove. No, said Trixie, fixing her chocolate brown eyes on him. I'm a mother. Oh, inquired Hildebrand. Trixie withdrew her feet and stood up, reaching to Hildebrand's knee. Bending her head back, she looked up at him. I've a husband, she announced. Oh? Yes, I found him in church, said Trixie, winding a red curl around a fat forefinger. He's called Bimey. An unusual name, remarked Hildebrand. Trixie nodded and took a deep breath. He's a great big man, she said, and he sits in my high chair and he sucks his thumb. She stepped back, her head to one side, to contemplate the effect of this bombshell. When Hildebrand looked properly horrified, Trixie crept nearer and added in a confidential whisper, he's very bad, but the angels don't know it. Then I won't tell them, he whispered back, and the friendship was sealed. Ever after, Trixie regarded and treated him as a fellow conspirator. With Koba and Betsy, the young man had less success. They disapproved of his manners. He did not seem to know about eating only with the right hand, thanking politely in 2 words, and never tilting one's chair. Joris, however, was enchanted with his new visitor. He fetched books for him from the libraries of Father Cobus and Dr. de Vries. Father Cobus's books were heavy and dusty and bound in dark green. They were by people like St. Augustine and St. Thomas. Dr. de Vries' books weren't so heavy and had gay covers, like fun covers. Hildebrand liked them all. He said he was a student of philosophy. Joris wanted to know what that was. It's the love of wisdom, said Hildebrand. Don't you get that out of the Bible? Asked Joris. Oh, yes, indeed, said Hildebrand, but there is wisdom in other books too. Well, what's the difference between wisdom and knowledge? Asked Joris. Hildebrand thought for a while, frowning at the floor. Then he said, knowledge is a matter of knowing facts. Wisdom is a matter of understanding and applying the principles. A certain amount of knowledge is necessary for wisdom, and without wisdom, knowledge is not only useless, it's dangerous. And I thought they were the same thing, said Joris. Teach me philosophy, will you? But Hildebrand said it was not a subject you could teach in a hurry. Think and read, he said, then you'll get there. Most of the time, Uncle Cor was out on mysterious errands in connection with the weapon dropping. In the daytime, he made himself up like an old man and hobbled off, leaning on a cane. He did not see much of Hildebrand and looked slightly askance at him. A tall, able-bodied young man more interested in reading than in doing underground work, he could not understand it. Joris noticed that his uncle was constantly conferring with Dirk Jan. Dirk Jan had acted superior ever since his trip, as if he had become a grown-up and Joris was miles beneath him. He seemed to class Joris with the little girls. Of course, Dirk Jan was older. Joris knew that, but he'd always talked to Joris and shared things with him. Now something had come between them. And a secret he had with Uncle Cor was part of it. Of course, Uncle Cor had been pleased with the way that Dirk Jan had carried out the mission, but Joris would have done it too if they'd let him. It irked Joris. He drew closer to Hildebrand just to show Dirk Jan that he had a friend too, but he was unhappy all the same. He and Dirk Jan had never felt so far apart before, and besides, Joris could smell excitement in the air. Something important was being planned, and they were leaving him out of it. Even Freya picked up her ears at odd moments and gave low growls. I know, Joris told her, flinging his arms around Freya's neck. The most wonderful things are happening and we aren't in on it. But he was determined to watch carefully and find out. He would teach them all that he wasn't a baby. Once he heard Dirk-Jan and Uncle Cor talking together. What about Schneiderhans? Dirk-Jan was saying. Don't underestimate him. Oh, we have him fixed, said Uncle Cor with a laugh. He'll get a message that will take him miles away. Then Uncle Cor caught sight of Joris and stopped suddenly, as usual. The important evening arrived and Uncle Cor was at home. He seemed more than ever irritated by Hildebrand, who was peacefully absorbed in the ideal state of Plato. What's the use of the old stuff, he says. It's today that counts. Hildebrand looked up. He had to withdraw for a moment from what he was reading and realized what Uncle Cor had been saying. Then he tilted his chair, put his feet against the mantelpiece, shocking Koba and Betsy. That's old stuff. That old stuff is our only hope, he said. It's what lifts us above the present and gives us perspective. There have been tyrannies and wars, robberies, cruelties, and oppressions ever since the world began. How are we going to get out of it? At this moment, you think it's enough to hate the Germans and to amass brute force to wallop them back to where they belong. When it's done, you'll say, now we've finished the war and injustice. We're finished with it. But you won't have, because the walloping you have given will rankle and will cause a new war. And so it goes on and on. If we listen only to our emotions and our instincts, we'll keep on hitting one another until we get as clever as the two dogs who fought each other until only their tails were left. I see, said Uncle Cor thoughtfully, but surely you can't let injustice rampage without stopping it. What about the victims? Does it help the prisoners and people dying of starvation that Plato thought of an ideal state over 2,000 years ago? Perhaps not, agreed Hildebrand with a little smile, but it ought to help them that Christ promised them an ideal state less than 2,000 years ago. Yes, admitted Uncle Cor, but how is one to love one's enemies when he's acting like the Germans? I admit it's hard, said Hildebrand, but I am coming to the conclusion that it is only practical way to get out of a vicious circle. He who takes up the sword shall perish by the sword, quoted Father suddenly. Well, you may talk, Hildebrand, said Mother, and I dare say you are right, but if they touched my children, I would take a bread knife to them, or a sword, or no sword. I would. That night, Joris awoke suddenly. Perhaps he heard a plank creaking. At any rate, he saw that the mattress beside him was empty. Dirk-Jan had gone. Quickly, he threw on his clothes and tiptoed downstairs. It was dark outside. The moon was hidden behind clouds. Joris had his mittens on and had wound a muffler around his throat. There was no sign of Dirk-Jan, but through the frosty air, he heard the creaking of wagon wheels. He ran along the dike in the direction of the sound. The cart was not as near as he had thought. Sounds carried far into the frosty air. He did not catch up with the wagon till well past the old mill. He went cautiously then, keeping in the shadow of the bushes. He noticed that the wagon was pulled by men. It stopped near a gate leading to one of the farmer Poot's meadows. Joris could hear the men opening the gate and coming through it. He crept near to investigate, but a little cough warned him that someone had been left in charge of the wagon. He ducked back quickly into the alder bushes, hoping that he hadn't been seen. What were these people doing? Shadowy figures were moving through the low-hanging mist. Joris was getting cold. He dared not move. In the distance, he could hear the village clock chime 12. He sat up suddenly. He'd seen a little light emerge from the mist at the far side of the meadow. A little later, another one appeared on the near side. Quite close to Joris, and then there was one on the left, one on the right, in the direction of Schneiderhan's farm. At the same time, the moon broke through the clouds, flooding the landscape with an eerie silver, through which the lights pricked warmly. Now he noticed the sound of an airplane. It came from the west and grew louder. Joris recognized the hum of an English bomber. It receded to the north. Then the noise stopped, and Joris saw a large, glittering silver plane come gliding low over the meadow. It was dropping little black objects wearing white parachutes, which drifted down like huge dandelion seeds. Thud, thud, they hit the ground. The lights had been extinguished as soon as the parcels had been dropped, and the plane went roaring off. The men were running about the meadow. Soon, 2 of them came through the gate carrying a heavy oblong chest, which they deposited on the wagon. Others soon followed, laden with boxes and parcels. The last man closed the gate and gave a short word of command. Hans grabbed the wagon pole and began to pull the wagon in the direction from which it had come. Joris heard Uncle Cor's warning. Earlier, he thought he had recognized Dirk Jan as one of the men. So this was Dirk Jan's secret. Okay, so here is a picture of the scene as it's happening. See the plane dropping. I don't know if you can you see the parachutes there? That's better. That's way better. Now you can see like the parachutes and the boxes and the people running and the gate that he was talking about that he heard creaking. Okay, glad to stretch his legs again, Joris followed the wagon at a respectable distance. He did not want to be discovered. Something warned him that his uncle would not be pleased. It had been a weapon dropping. Joris had witnessed. Of course, that meant sure death if it was discovered. The wagon swerved into the side road leading to the old giant. The creaking of its wheels sounded fainter and fainter. Then it stopped. Joris had been listening so intently that he did not look where he was going. He ran slap bang into Hendrik Schneiderhan's. Remember who he is. He's the bad dude. Okay, guys, next time it's called Dark Days, chapter 17. So I will see you next time.